On the night of March 27th, 1999, the sky over northern Serbia looked calm, almost indifferent, the kind of darkness pilots learn to trust. But hidden within that darkness was a quiet waiting, a patience sharpened by weeks of study and years of resentment. And flying into it was an aircraft that many believe could not be touched, a machine wrapped in myth as much as technology, the F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth aircraft, a symbol of American air power and modern warfare. Designed to slip through enemy defenses unseen, unheard, and untouchable. Yet on this night, history was about to remind the world that no weapon is truly invincible. The war was NATO's air campaign against Yugoslavia, launched to force Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic to halt operations in Kosovo, and from the opening days, the skies belonged to NATO, whose aircraft struck bridges, command centers, and air defenses with near impunity, while Serbian forces, outmatched and outnumbered, retreated into forests, villages, and underground bunkers, adapting, hiding, and waiting. Among the most feared NATO assets was the F-117, a black, angular aircraft that looked less like a plane and more like a shard of darkness. Its faceted surfaces designed to scatter radar waves, its mission to strike the most heavily defended targets at the heart of enemy territory. And for years it had done so flawlessly, from Panama to the Gulf War, earning a reputation as invisible, a ghost that could pass through the densest radar nets and emerge unscathed. But invisibility, as the Serbian air defense crews understood, was not the same as immunity, and long before the first NATO bombs fell, Colonel Zoltan Dani, commander of the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade, had been thinking about how to fight an enemy he could barely see. Dani was not a reckless man or a romantic one. He was methodical, disciplined, and deeply aware of his limitations. Commanding aging Soviet say, surface-to-air missiles, systems designed in the 1950s to shoot down high-flying bombers, not low-observable strike aircraft guided by satellites and computers. Yet he believed that technology, no matter how advanced, always carried compromises, and his task was to find them. Serbian radar operators had learned quickly that NATO aircraft followed patterns, that stealth planes in particular relied on predictable flight corridors to minimize risk, and that while F-117s were difficult to track, they were not completely invisible, especially to older, longer wavelength radars that NATO planners had largely dismissed as obsolete. Dani ordered his crews to operate in short bursts, turning radars on for no more than 15 to 20 seconds at a time to avoid detection by NATO's anti-radiation missiles, then shutting them down and moving, constantly relocating launchers, command vehicles, and radar units under cover of darkness, decoys, and civilian camouflage, transforming Serbia's air defenses into a game of cat and mouse played at night, with the stakes measured in lives and national survival. By late March, Dani and his men had observed something crucial. The F-117s were flying the same routes night after night, approaching targets from similar directions, at similar altitudes, relying on their stealth to protect them. And that predictability, born of confidence, would become their weakness. On March 27th, Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Patrick Dale Zelko, an experienced U.S. Air Force pilot, climbed into the cockpit of his F-117 at Aviano Air Base in Italy, preparing for a routine mission by the standards of the war, striking a target near Belgrade under the cover of darkness, confident in the aircraft and the doctrine that had protected him and others like him through dozens of sorties. The Nighthawk lifted into the night, crossed the Adriatic, and headed toward Yugoslav airspace, its angular shape and radar-absorbent materials designed to melt into the background of enemy sensors, while NATO aircraft jammed communications and suppressed air defenses across the region, creating what planners believed was an impenetrable shield. On the ground, Dani's brigade waited, radars dark, launchers hidden, crews tense, but disciplined, listening, watching, counting time, knowing that if they activated their systems too early or too long, they would be destroyed within minutes, yet also knowing that their window, if it came at all, would be brief. As the F-117 approached its target area, the weather turned against it. Cloud cover forced Zelko to open his bomb bay doors earlier than planned to acquire the target, a necessary step, but one that briefly increased the aircraft's radar signature, a small but critical change. And at that moment, Serbian radar operators detected something unusual, a faint, fleeting return that did not behave like background noise, a whisper where there should have been silence. Danny ordered the radar on, then off, then on again, correlating the returns, confirming what he dared not believe too quickly. And when the picture stabilized, he made the decision, calm and precise, to engage. The assay. 3 missiles were old, bulky, and far from sophisticated by NATO standards, but they were still deadly. And as the launch command was given, 2 missiles leapt from their rails, streaking into the night sky on pillars of fire, guided not by modern active seekers, but by radar illumination and the skill of the crew controlling them. In the cockpit, Zelko received no warning. The F-117 systems were not designed to alert pilots to traditional radar-guided threats, assuming stealth would prevent such engagement, and seconds later, an explosion rocked the aircraft, shrapnel tearing through its structure, systems failing, the myth of invulnerability shattering in an instant. Zelko ejected as the aircraft spiraled down, parachuting into enemy territory while the burning wreckage of the Nighthawk fell into fields near the village of Budanovci, becoming the first and only stealth aircraft ever shot down in combat. On the ground, Serbian villagers watched in disbelief as pieces of the black aircraft scattered across their land, tangible proof that the invisible could be made visible, that the giant could be wounded, and Serbian forces quickly secured the area, recovering debris that would later be displayed, photographed, and studied, symbols of defiance against a technologically superior foe. Zelko, meanwhile, hid for hours, evading patrols, relying on his training and luck, until he was rescued by a U.S. Air Force combat search and rescue team in a daring nighttime operation, extracted safely and returned to NATO lines, alive but forever marked by the experience. The downing of the Nighthawk sent shockwaves through military planners around the world. NATO acknowledged the loss, but moved quickly to minimize its significance, emphasizing that stealth was not invisibility, that the aircraft had performed as designed, and that the circumstances were unique, yet behind closed doors, lessons were being absorbed with urgency. The Serbs had demonstrated that with discipline, adaptation, and understanding of an enemy's habits, even outdated systems could pose a threat, and that overconfidence, even when backed by cutting-edge technology, could be dangerous. Danny's brigade did not celebrate openly. They knew that survival depended on continued movement and restraint, and indeed, NATO intensified its efforts to hunt Serbian air defenses, eventually degrading them through sustained pressure. But the psychological victory could not be undone the moment when the myth cracked. In the years that followed, the story grew, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes simplified, with claims that the F-117 had been tracked by cell phones, shot down by luck, or betrayed by design flaws. But the truth was more complex and more human, a convergence of careful observation, tactical patience, environmental factors, and a single moment when routine met resistance. Danny would later meet Zelko in person, the former enemies shaking hands, sharing stories, embodying a quieter truth of war, that behind the machines and doctrines are people making decisions under pressure, people who adapt, learn, and survive. The wreckage of the Nighthawk would find its way into museums, its angular panels displayed as relics of a turning point, not because stealth had failed, but because it had been challenged, refined, and improved in response, leading to newer generations of aircraft that learned from that night over Serbia. The shoot-down did not end stealth, but it ended the illusion that any technology could operate without consequence, that patterns could remain unnoticed, that wars could be fought without friction. For the Serbs, it was proof that resistance mattered. For NATO, it was a warning written in fire. And for history, it was a reminder that even in an age of satellites and algorithms, wars are still shaped by human perception, patience, and the courage to act in the narrow window between doubt and decision. On that night, in March 1999, the Nighthawk was not defeated by magic or chance, but by an old truth dressed in new circumstances. That no weapon is unbeatable, no system perfect, and no story complete without the moment when the impossible becomes real, falling from the sky in flames, and landing in the collective memory of the world.